Welcome to the deep dive, where we take on these colossal mountains of information that you send us, articles, papers, guides, and give you the tools to climb them, and fast.
And today we are definitely tackling a giant.
We are. It's Leo Tolstoy's monumental epic War and Peace.
It's not really a book you just read, it's more like an entire universe you have to navigate. A historical, social, philosophical universe. The definition of a deep dive subject.
Absolutely. And our sources today are a fantastic mix. We've got literary criticism, some really deep philosophical essays on free will and determinism, and crucially, some very practical guides comparing the different English translations.
Which is a huge deal for a book this size.
It is. So our mission here is to get a quick handle on why this 1,200-page novel is seen as the absolute peak of world literature, and not just for the story, but for its really revolutionary philosophy of history.
Well, the novel itself was serialized, I think, between 1865 and 1869, and it's set right in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars in early 19th century Russia.
Right, from about 1805 to 1812.
Exactly. And what makes it so unique is that it's this radical fusion of things. It's a novel, it's a history book, and it's a philosophy tract, all kind of smashed together into one.
Okay, so let's start with that scope, because the historical realism is just legendary. Tolstoy wasn't just writing a story near history, he was building this hyper-realistic world. What was his secret sauce for that?
His commitment to it was just absolutely, it came from deep research, but also from very personal experience.
Like his own time in the military.
He poured his own brutal experiences from the Crimean War right onto the page. But he also used his family history, his father's own accounts of serving in the army against Napoleon.
Which explains why the battle scenes feel so real. They're not glorious or heroic, they're just chaos. Pure, visceral chaos seen through the eyes of someone who's terrified and confused.
Precisely. That's what gives the big events their authenticity. Whether it's the humiliating Russian defeat at Austerlitz in 1805, or the final triumph over the French in 1812.
But it's not just the battlefield. He maps out the whole social world, too.
The whole social landscape. And the contrast between the different settings is almost like another character in the book.
Right.
You have the aristocratic salons of St. Petersburg, which are obsessed with French culture, French language. It's all very artificial. That's the world of Pierre and Prince Andrei, at the beginning at least.
And then you have Moscow.
Yes, Moscow and the country estates. That's where he places the heart of authentic Russian life, spirituality, family, tradition. That's where the characters go to find genuine meaning away from all the pretense.
And that tension between the artificial and the authentic really sets the stage for his whole philosophy.
It does.
Yeah.
And the academic world has been dissecting it ever since. I mean, it's viewed through every lens imaginable.
It's amazing how detailed some of the analysis is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have the standard literary stuff, exploring the big 19th century debates, like the Westernizers versus the Slavophiles, which is a constant conflict in the novel.
Can you just quickly unpack that for us? Because
Right.
that debate is everywhere in the book.
Of course. The Westernizers believed Russia needed to adopt European ideas. Liberalism, science, the Enlightenment. The Slavophiles, on the other hand, argued for prioritizing Russian tradition, Orthodox spirituality. They saw the West as morally corrupt.
And the characters are constantly wrestling with this.
Constantly. Pierre and Andrei really embody that tension. But then you have studies that are incredibly focused.
Like what?
Like deep dives into the ethical complexity of a minor character like Sonia. Or even investigations into the meaning of food and eating in the novel.
Wow, food.
When you get to that level of analysis, the author has built a world so consistent that even the smallest details carry some kind of philosophical weight.
Okay, that breadth is why it endures, but we have to transition to the real philosophical core, the thing that makes this book so revolutionary. I'm talking about Tolstoy's takedown of the great man theory of history.
This is where it stops being just a novel and becomes a tract. He argues that history is absolutely not determined by a few great leaders, like Napoleon or Tsar Alexander.
So what drives it then?
It's driven by the sum of millions of tiny, individual human choices. He calls it an ocean of individual actions.
He really seems to despise Napoleon, doesn't he? He sees him as this ultimate fraud.
He does. He portrays Napoleon as arrogant, totally naive, believing he can control destiny just by issuing an order. In Tolstoy's view, he's just a label we put on events after the fact.
And in contrast, he holds up General Kutuzov.
The sleepy old General Kutuzov, yes.
Yeah.
He becomes the hero precisely because of his inaction, his passivity.
That's such a radical idea. You win by not fighting.
It's brilliant. Kutuzov understood that Napoleon's fate was already sealed. It was determined by huge, invisible forces. The climate, supply lines, the collective will of the Russian people. So a big, decisive battle was just a needless slaughter.
So if Napoleon is just a puppet, does that mean everyone is? In the epilogue, he seems to push this idea toward a kind of hard determinism, right?
Yeah, that's the exact tension he's wrestling with. He uses this logical argument, a reductio ad absurdum. He basically says that if we admit that we are truly free, we end up in an absurdity where history is just random chaos. So to avoid that absurdity, we have to admit our dependence on causality, on time, and accept that deterministic laws govern history.
So he's setting an intellectual trap. It's either total chaos or total determinism. And since chaos is absurd, it must be determinism.
Precisely. But here's the counterpoint our philosophical sources bring up. The critique is that Tolstoy's whole argument rests on this flawed assumption from his time.
Which is?
The idea that you can meaningfully refer to the totality of being, that you can treat all of reality as a single, definite initial state that determines everything that comes after.
So if you reject that basic premise, that we can even conceive of reality as a closed system, then his whole argument kind of falls apart.
Exactly. You're no longer forced into his absurd conclusion. It opens up space for a kind of constrained or relative freedom. And that's where the heart of the novel really is. The characters feel the push of history, but they're still desperately searching for some small corner where their own moral choice matters.
And this is where it gets really innovative. He wasn't just diagnosing the problem, he offered a mathematical prescription for how historians should fix it. The integration metaphor.
It's just astonishing. A 19th century novel is basically saying historians need to learn calculus. He says that instead of looking for the great man, the single discrete cause, the historian must integrate the wills of all people.
So how does the math actually work as a metaphor for history?
Well, he says history is a continuous process, an unbroken flow. But historians make the mistake of looking only at discrete, disconnected moments. A king's decree, a battle.
It's like trying to understand a smooth curve by only looking at a few dots on the line.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's almost like Zeno's paradox of Achilles and the tortoise. You can't understand continuous motion by looking at discrete units.
So what's the solution?
He says historians must look at infinitesimally small units for observation, what he calls the differential of history. That's the individual human tendency. And then you have to find the sum of all of them. That's the integration part.
So he's saying stop looking for the big cause. The cause is everywhere, spread out among millions of people, which means it's essentially unknowable.
Exactly. And for you, as the reader, that metaphor is a guide. It tells you to stop looking for Napoleon's genius and start paying attention to the tiny moments of moral choice, of suffering, of love, because those infinitesimally small wills are what actually make up the flow of history.
Okay, now that we've made the intellectual case for climbing this mountain, we need to talk about the practical gear. The first question on everyone's mind: which translation should I actually pick up?
And for a book this long, that's a high-stakes decision. The good news is Tolstoy is generally seen as an easy author to translate.
Why is that?
His prose is very clear, very direct. He avoids the kind of dense, flowery language you'd get from someone like, say, Dostoevsky.
So where's the difficulty then?
The main thing is the French. The Russian aristocrats of the time spoke French constantly, and Tolstoy wrote about 10% of the dialogue in French to be realistic. How a translator handles that French really defines the reading experience.
Okay, let's break down the main contenders. The Pierre and Volokonsky. The PV, that's the bestseller you see everywhere now.
Right. PV is famous for its precision. They aim for a very literal, word-for-word translation. The downside is that it can sometimes feel a bit stiff in English. And crucially, they keep the French in the text and put the translation in the footnotes.
Which sounds really disruptive, constantly looking down at the bottom of the page.
For many readers, it is. It can really break your flow. Then you have the mods.
Elmer and Louise Maud.
Yes. Their translation has huge historical weight because Tolstoy himself actually approved it, so it's definitely faithful. But it has the same issue. French in the text, translation in the footnotes.
Okay, so what's the option for someone who just wants a smooth read?
For that, you'd look at the Anthony Briggs translation from 2005. It's widely recommended for its flow and its pace. He tends to integrate the French smoothly into the English text. The only minor complaint you hear is about some Britishisms in the soldiers' dialogue, which can feel a little jarring, but for most, it's a much less disruptive read.
So the key takeaway for you is clear. Don't just commit blindly, test them out. Read the first chapter of PV, of Maud, of Briggs, and just see which voice you actually connect with.
And honestly, don't ignore the aesthetics. It's a 1,200-page book. The font size, the spacing, how it feels in your hands, those are huge psychological factors. You want a book that feels comfortable to spend a lot of time with.
So to recap this whole deep dive, War and Peace is an epic defined by its brutal realism, its huge social scope, its crushing philosophical critique of authority, and this really revolutionary mathematical idea that history must be integrated, not just recorded.
And I think the core message is that while history itself is chaotic and overwhelming and, for Tolstoy, deterministic, the real lasting human value is found in the simple, quiet, spiritual quest for an authentic self, in love, in family.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you. Tolstoy's rejection of the individual ego in history, the great van idea, is directly connected to his rejection of self-love in his ethics. The novel seems to suggest that maybe the only truly free act in a world governed by these massive deterministic laws is the personal struggle against narcissism. If the chaos of history is beyond our control, is focusing on the morality of our own infinitesimal human will the only thing that actually matters? So think about it. What are your own daily infinitesimal units of moral choice?